Hey there, this is Beth, back with another YouTube Pagan Challenge question, and I think this is 6. Question number 6. And it is cultural influences. What are my cultural influences? I'd say first and foremost probably was the influence of the Western esoteric tradition. And predominantly so, especially when I first started exploring things, because there wasn't a lot out there. You know, there was no, what is her name? Silver, to write a broomstick. What is that book? I don't even remember. To write a silver, or is it Silver Raven Wolf? To write a broomstick? I don't know. Anyways, that book, the teen witch kind of lady book thing. We didn't have that when I was growing up. So when I was a teenager, I got Colin Wilson, who unfortunately does not read well at this point in time. Back in the early 80s, it was not so noticeable. His writing is definitely a creature of the late 60s, early 70s, which I think was when he was writing. I'm not really sure. I could be wrong on the dates. Could be earlier. But so Colin Wilson and his Occult Mysteries kind of book exploring the occult is where I first learned about like Madame Blavatsky, Gurdjieff, that kind of stuff. That kind of weird theosophical stuff that most people don't know about, which I find really weird because I've been entrenched in that kind of knowledge since I was around 13, 14. And it really came to light when I was taking one of my anthros classes was on Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism specific. Was that Tibetan Buddhism? No, that wasn't. That was a different class. This was, what was that class then? I think it might have been Himalayan kingdoms or something to that effect. We were exploring Buddhism within the Himalayan areas, and we had to do a group project, and one of them was the impact of Buddhism on theosophy, and that was my section because I was the only one who knew what the fuck it was. So, but that introduced me early on to Elena Blavatsky and her ilk, and also Robert Graves. Colin Wilson was a great one, a great fan of Robert Graves, so that got me interested into his White Goddess book beyond his Greek mythology books that I already had, and into Joseph Campbell more so. It really kind of opened up magic and paranormal occult experience into more of a psychological, to a certain extent, area. And just so Colin Wilson was definitely an author who had a great impact on me early on, just because he was one of the few things that I could find out there on anything magical, occult, witchcraft, anything. So it kind of set me up in the Western, kind of heading into the Western esoteric traditions. And my influence mainly are of Western origin. I have not really felt a big call towards Asian stuff, even though I've kind of looked at stuff, looked at some of the gods and goddesses in Hinduism, things like that. I definitely don't go I don't do anything with those. They're just not areas that have called to me yet. I think Western and American culture too. American culture really too has influenced me with the Discordian movement and identifying with that in my early 20s, and still identifying with the Discordian movement within America greatly still at this point in time. So I think American culture also has really heavily influenced me and how I practice and how things kind of keep influencing, because most everything I have is based in a Western tradition, whether it's Samaria, which is the basis for much of what we've come to know as Western culture, because it is the basis of where the Bible came to be, and the Bible is such an influence on European culture and Western culture in general that you can't, I would classify it more in Western than Eastern, or even Middle Eastern to a certain extent, because the older back you go, the more impact it has on the whole world, especially the Western world, with the advent of cuneiform and pre-cuneiform and writing and all that kind of stuff. Thank God for taxes, or we may never have had writing. Nothing like trying to keep track of how much you got to owe the government and how much the government wants from you. So Samaria definitely, Lilith especially, to a lesser extent Ereshkigal, has been very profound of dealing with that older tradition. Also Greek myths. I think I talked about this a little bit on Heavy, on the Path one. Greek mythology, to a certain extent Celtic mythology, British Isles history in general. I have a lot of Barry Cunliffe floating around and a lot of stuff on history books. Because really, history and fairy tale, it's like, you want the 200 level, 300 level magic book. That's where you start going to. It's no longer, you don't get to go down and buy a nice little Scott Cunningham book and have it be advanced. That's why you don't really see a lot of advanced, I think, is because most of the advanced stuff is more experimental or experiential. It's like you see Orion Fox, who does some good work on what I would call 200 and beyond. R.J. Stewart also does some really good stuff on 200 and beyond. But all those are like stuff you have to like go experience to understand the experience. It's not, this is how, it provides you with like frameworks and containers, but not the meat. Just not sure how to, because someone else, you can't experience it. If you can't experience someone else's experience. You have to experience your own. And I think for me, that is also a huge influence of that. You have to go out there and experience yourself. But back to cultural influences. Celtic, Norse right now has been proving very strong. Call to me. Part of my bloodline is Norse, coming from Dutch and I think they were Norwegian, if I remember correctly, a Norwegian bloodline. So that has been calling to me a lot recently. That also with one of the things that draws me with the Western esoteric tradition is I do really enjoy reading about ceremonial magic and also chaos magic. Both of those I find very fascinating. I would not consider myself in any way a chaos magician or ceremonial magician. I'm much too fuck it to be a CM. I don't want to have all this crap. I just want to do it, and that works for me. Finding things, works for me. But yeah, I'd say Western esoteric is really a strong. The more I thought about this question, I'm like, that really, as much as the theosophists drive me crazy sometimes, because it's like everything just, they try to like all make it be Egyptian. It's like they try to tie everything back into the same thing, and I think to a certain extent, yes, things do get tied back into places because you do have like flood myths. You have flood myths in the Americas, you have flood myths in the Middle East, you have them in China, you have a lot of flood myths. So you start to wonder, is it just something that came out of Samaria, Mesopotamia, where you had the Tigris Euphrates and the flooding of those two rivers, which could be quite detrimental. It's for societies early on, or was there something more catastrophic that happened worldwide, on a worldwide level, that created a massive flood? Or did you just have so much localized flooding at one point that everyone has a flood myth? Lots of guesses, and we're never going to know. Yeah, I just keep exploring. I just keep trying to explore. You know, if it interests me, it's like Akashic Records. All of a sudden, it's just kind of kept popping up for me here and there and everywhere. So I'm like, okay, let's go find out about it and see what's up with that. More Western esoteric, you know, with tarot and things like that. Tarot and oracle cards. I love tarot. It's a wonderful medium to work with, and I find oracle cards also to be much more almost freeing, because you don't have quite the container that you do with tarot with oracle cards. Oracle cards can be much more free flow and intuitive than tarot, which does have a framework to work with in your intuition and such. Trying to Aleister Crowley fascinates me. A lot of that whole Golden Dawn thing. It's like Dion Fortune. What is her? How is it? Dion Fortune. It's Fortune. I'm just brain dead today. I've been fighting off some kind of glandular thing, and my brain is not functioning. Psychic Self-Defense Lady. It's like her book, along with Colin Wilson's, does not hold up well to age. It's like, whoa, lady. When she starts talking about women and our hysteria, because, you know, we have wombs and we're hysterical creatures, it's like, honey, you're a woman too. Why don't we, you know, you're even coming from a mental health background back then. Oh boy. Yeah, rereading her work, I'm like, oh, the feminist in me just cringes. It's like, oh. But there is, you know, Psychic Self-Defense does have some interesting things in it. It very dated once again. And I think it's nice to see some things that are being written now that aren't dated coming out. You know, it's so much easier to access things these days. You can find so much more material out there to spread your wings and spread your cultural influences, you know, out of what, you know, you may start in. You don't have to stay there. You can just explore if you so desire. And I think that exploration is really what keeps, you know, cultural influences keep influencing me and changing and morphing, and be able to identify little blobs of other things that appeal to me and incorporate them, if I so desire, too, into my spiritual practice. It's probably about what I have to say on cultural influence. I'd say really definitely American culture has been huge impact on me. Especially with the neo-pagan movements and that kind of stuff, Dianic Wicca coming out, you know, and kind of exploring that stuff, which was, you know, back then pretty freaking radical. Now it's not so, it's kind of more normal within the pagan, is it? I don't know. I see it as more normalized than it used to be. You know, it's kind of an interesting thing. You know, it's like, you know, you're in this subculture. And I think, you know, being in this spiritual subculture, well, actually, really, well, yeah, it kind of is, because I got ostracized when I was 12 for not being Mormon. I was identifying as Lutheran at that point still. So I you know, ostracized for being another form of Christian, because the Mormons do consider themselves Christian, even though many other Christian faiths do not. It's a whole little bundle of worms if you ever decide to open it with someone who's Mormon. So, you know, I think in many ways that being ostracized for that set me up into a subculture of other people who were ostracized, which also helped me identify like the subcultures of the Western esoteric tradition and the subcultures of Discordianism early on, and kind of really bring those aspects into my faith as opposed to continuing on in Lutheranism, which really was not all that interesting as far as a spiritual practice for me. I guess if you go deep, you could, I don't know. JC just was never my guy. He was never that, I was never that into him, I guess. Whereas like Persephone, Frigg, Lilith, Odin, Herne was definitely a big one. Still definitely a big one. You know, and working with nature more so than inside too, with trees, and trees, huge influence, but I don't know if those are culture. Would you consider trees cultural? I'm not sure on that one. But yeah, so, yeah. Oh shit, we're at 16 minutes. Okay. We call that enough rambling. I gotta go feed some horses before they get angry at me. Everyone have a wonderful day, and this was question number 6. Cultural influence. Talk at you later. Bye-bye.